to your plate. TexasBeefHouse.com.
Top 5 things BYU must do to win the Big 12. And I'll just warn you guys, we're at the limits of my imagination here on BYU winning it. As we get further down the line,
you say this every day.
But this one was hard to do because I just don't see it. But, I'll keep going until we're through.
Did you think Baylor was going to go 12-2 2 years ago?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No, I absolutely did not. So, sure. Number 5, maintain their physical style of play. Kalani Sitake has them. When you play BYU, you remember you played BYU for a few days because they absolutely will maul you physically. They need to continue that as they get into the Big 12. This team especially because they do not have as many playmakers as they did a couple years ago, but they have some. So they need to absolutely dominate you in the trenches, get you down, make sure you're worn down by games, but they have to maintain that physical style of play so where you are in the fourth quarter going, can we please just leave and go home? That's what they're going to need to do week in and week out. Because, again, this is not a team that's probably as wide open as some of the other teams will be offensively. I think they'll be okay, but they do not have the depth at the playmaker position. They've lost some of their best ones over the last couple of years, especially losing Jaron Hall. And look, we'll talk about Kedon Slovis at the end here, but losing Jaron Hall is going to be big for them as they step into the league.
Yeah, I mean, they had to get more physical last year because the way Baylor beat them up 2 years ago. Kalani Sitake cited that directly, that game, many times last offseason, and talking about what they needed to do. They did it, obviously. They won that rematch in Provo last year, albeit in a very close, down-to-the-wire type of a game. It's one thing to have your starters physical, but do they have the depth to maintain that physicality beyond that point for very long? I mean, if injuries were to hit, that's a question that I don't think we really know right now. But, yeah, I mean, they're more physical than perhaps some of the others rolling in, at least on day one, and that's part of their identity. That's part of their brand. So, yeah, I would imagine that's going to be important to bring on over.
They allowed that Baylor game to sit with them for a year, and it's almost like maybe they took their eye off the radar of everybody else, but they were bound and determined to match the physicality, which they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 4. Use your experience with the schedule to your advantage. They've played good, tough, independent schedules over the years. If that provides them with any kind of advantage, and look, we've kind of debated on whether it will or not on the show in the past, but if you can get some sort of advantage of that experience of attrition and going through a schedule and having tough games week in and week out, use that to your advantage. Certainly, make sure that your guys are experienced. They've been through this. They know it's not going to be as much of a change for them as maybe somebody else. So use that as much as you can. But, again, it is still going to be different, doing it with a schedule like they played a bunch of Pac-12 teams a couple of years ago to now being in a Power 5 conference week in and week out dealing with it.
They should be, battle-tested, but, it's a new team. I think that at least from a coaching standpoint, you've got that experience of sort of what it's like. From a player standpoint, it's probably a bit scattered, but they do play some good teams year in and year out. I don't think it's the week after week that it will be in the Big 12, so there is that difference that they're still going to have to adjust to. But, they played some good schools, so, lining up against Oklahoma State or TCU or whoever, I don't think it's going to psych them out too much. I don't think it's going to psych out any of the teams, but at least as far as getting in the trenches and dogging it out, I think that they'll be well equipped to do that.
Number 3, as much Kody Epps as possible. This is your best playmaker. Get him involved as much as you can. The more touches he gets, the more creative ways you can use him will be great because he is an exciting playmaker. The guy can flat out run. We got to talk to him at Big 12 Media Days. It was one of my favorite interviews that we did. He's, the more you can get him involved, the more exciting the game's going to be, the more teams are going to have a headache. But as much Kody Epps as possible, which means keeping him healthy for 12 games, getting him involved creatively in the offense, which I don't have a worry that they'll do, but just make sure that, especially when you're in that red zone, you do some kind of wild stuff with Kody Epps because he can score when he has the ball in his hands.
I think you keep him healthy so one day he becomes our president. I was so impressed with that young man. I know that's kind of silly, but I was blown away by him. John Rice Plumlee was special too, but Kody Epps, yeah, make him as much Kedon, Slovis, etc., but make Kody Epps, give him the opportunities to make plays.
Yeah, he's a good player. He can get in the end zone for you. So, yeah, I think put the ball in your best player's hands is the preferred method, and he's certainly one of their best players. So, yeah, the more Epps that we see is a good thing for the Cougars.
Number 2, keep Provo loud. That is one of the toughest places to play. When people go in there, they know it. They've got a great fan base, and that also means, intimidating some of the fans on the road as well, because BYU shows out on the road. We saw it here. We've seen it a lot of places. When BYU has a road game, they sell out their allotment. But especially you've got to own Provo. You got to win all those games, make it really difficult, especially for the teams that haven't been there before. Keep them, back on their heels and using that deafening crowd and that completely united front that they have in the stands to intimidate your opponents and keep winning at home. That's the same for everybody, but especially when you've got a place in a home field advantage like Provo, you have to use it to your advantage.
Heard really good things. Didn't get to go out there last year, but from the people that were in attendance, it's one of the better atmospheres they'd been to. It obviously had an effect to some extent on the game, and I think that's one of the things you feel the best about, and one of the big positives that you have rolling into this year. Whereas with Houston, for example, they've got to worry about how many tickets they're selling or how great the crowds are going to be. Dana Holgerson's brought that up. You don't hear that from Kalani, Sitake, or that side of the new additions. I don't know how much of that is a deal for Cincinnati. Now, UCF sold out their season tickets again, or is in the process of doing so, and the Bounce House has a great reputation, but Provo will be a challenge for the teams that go there this year, especially if they're playing pretty well. That's just a double whammy, but that was a good scene last year, and I expect that to be the experience for a lot of teams as they roll in there.
People raved about it. The experience, the atmosphere, the mind-numbing type noise, and the fact that you felt like if you were there as a Baylor fan, you might have been the only one that was there as a Baylor fan.
Yeah. Make the visiting fans feel oh so very alone. Number 1.
And the team.
Yeah. Make this Kedon Slovis' best stop. Absolutely, you have to make this. He's been at USC, and he's been at Pitt. And look, you can talk about, some of the guys that transfer all over the place. He told us his story and at Big 12 Media Days, and I suggest you go back and watch that video, because it does give really interesting insight into the transfer portal and what's going on. It's where he went to Pittsburgh to play with Jordan Addison and Mark Whipple, and then he gets to Pittsburgh, and Mark Whipple and Jordan Addison are not there. The Biletnikoff Award winner gone. The coordinator he went to go play for left. So he was there. It didn't work out at Pitt. Now he's at BYU. Kalani Sitake feels really confident with him, and we'll see, because he was a highly touted quarterback. He had that one short run at USC where it looked like he might have been their quarterback to the future, and that certainly wasn't the case. So if they want to win, this has got to be his best stop ever.
I mean, it won't be hard to be.
I mean,
geez.
But
I think he's a bit overrated. I mean, at this point, I think that he's a good player. He's a notable player name-wise, but I think as far as the way his performances are talked about, I think we're still stuck on the name and not necessarily like the actual statistics and whatnot. But yeah, he definitely needs to have his best go-around. It's his final year. It's the last big move for him. For the foreseeable future, and certainly for his college career, and BYU's obviously putting a lot of weight on his shoulders. So yeah, they need it to work for a variety of different reasons, and if he has his best showing, then that, like everything else, if it goes well, bodes well for BYU, and if not, then that'll be a story in itself. But they need to make sure that he has a great one, and it seems like from all indications they feel good about doing so.
All right, I got a question, and I know I'm dumb asking this question. So I looked at Kedon Slovis on Wikipedia. He was an all Pac-12 quarterback, first team in 2020. Now, I also know that was COVID. USC won the South Championship. He was the freshman of the year before. What happened? Who came in? Was it JT Daniels, or was he like already there and gone? Who was the reason? What was the reason he left? Because
there's a
Caleb
coaching
Williams was
change.
last year.
It's coaching change.
Coaching change. Okay.
Yeah.
The Graham Harrell, that's right. The connection to Graham Harrell. He absolutely cherished that time.
The lack of connection to Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams playing as much into that as Graham Harrell. But, yeah, I think the whole switching of coaches and, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner rolling into town probably was the writing on the wall for Kedon Slovis.
Yeah, there you go. I knew Caleb Williams had to be a part of that. All right, thanks to everybody that makes us sound